Hello, everyone. Today, I'm really excited to be welcoming Jake Kuczyruk, Vice President of Business Development at the ArcView Group. Just to provide a bit of background on Jake, he's a native of Detroit and Indianapolis. Jake moved to the Bay Area after graduating from Indiana University with degrees in public policy and business. Previously, he founded a menswear service, Thai Society, that was part of the core team and was part of the core team at Console FM, both being companies that participated in the renowned 500 Startups program. After turn running business development for both West Agile Labs, Megabots, Jake shifted into the blockchain space and joined WeTrust, Dispatch Labs, and the Bureau, all companies in the Bay Area, and has transitioned ever since to work as an active startup advisor, serving as managing director of the Founders Institute, a South chapter, and as a mentor for accelerators like 500 Startups, GSV Labs, Alchemist Accelerator, among others. He's guest lectured for master level university courses and assists a prominent Japanese investor in sourcing potential investments. So Jake has a wealth of knowledge, really excited to be able to have this conversation. And to get started, I really want to begin with the moment back in 2011 when you decided to spontaneously move from Indiana to Mountain View, California.
Sure.
What was that all about, and what did you do when you moved out?
Of course. And Mateo, really appreciate you having me on. I'm honored to be a part of this as a fellow Big Ten alumni. So for me, I mean, it was a very interesting decision to move out west. I didn't know a damn thing about San Francisco, the Bay Area, about startups. I packed entirely shorts and then realized very quickly that the Bay Area is a little bit colder than LA and SoCal. But for me, you know, I'd graduated, I had the degree in public policy and business. I had started working at a commercial realty firm in Indianapolis. And I was like, look, if I'm going to stick at this, like I'm going to be an expert in the Indianapolis market. I didn't want to live in Indianapolis. So when I got a call from one of my lifelong best friends saying, look, I just got accepted into the startup accelerator out in Mountain View. You know, I have 3 developers on my team. We do not know how to talk to people. Can you just come out here and talk to people for us? And sure enough, I was like, okay, well, I know some of these words. I don't know what a startup fully is. I have a general idea. And ultimately ended up hopping on a plane and I was out there 4 days later. So yeah, living in that one bedroom with 3 other guys was definitely interesting, but you know, being part of one of those extremely early, you know, batch 1 or batch 2, depending on how you quantify it, the of 500 startups. I mean, just looking around at some of the other people who went through that cohort, you know, it's incredible. Many prominent VCs, many successful exits that came out of there. And I just feel, you know, just so blessed to be able to have worked across so many different industries. It was definitely a hard choice to move out, but one I certainly don't regret.
Yeah, and Jake, what were some of the main observations that you made when you moved out? The transition of being a young professional in the Midwest to now being in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, you know, I think one thing you'll find is Silicon Valley always, you know, it gets this gets painted with this brush for good reason, but it is really always on not only the cutting edge of innovation, but I feel like there is a deeper focus around social impact, and that can be environmental impact, that can be racial and social justice, but in general, I'd say out here out west, those two kind of go hand in hand. I think when it comes to the network back home, you'd be surprised how many great founders end up moving out from the Midwest. You know, very quickly, I think, you know, I was working at a WeWork 10 years ago that was just getting started. And, you know, I looked at my table, my hot desk, and, you know, there was 3 or 4 other Big Ten alum right there. So, you know, you find ways to plug into a network, and it's by building your own circles. Finding like-minded individuals that, you know, you might be able to bond over something like, you know, fundraising and you know, Eric Ries's The Lean Startup, or you might bond over cannabis, you know, personally or professionally. You know, there's a lot of different ways I think you can kind of find your tribe. But I would say, you know, what I found is I always felt like I could be a little bit more comfortable, kind of more myself out here. You know, I think, you know, when you're back home, you know, you're often kind of surrounded by a lot of friends that you've been friends with your whole life, and they're from the same small towns, and you graduate and you still stay kind of with that same network. I think coming out here really lets you broaden your horizons by meeting people from such a wide range of different backgrounds with different motivations, different values, different humor. You end up just finding like I said, kind of building your own tribe, instead of just kind of sticking as the, part of one that you previously were, affiliated with.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredibly exciting. And I'd love to touch on that further as we move along. But I want us to now begin talking about Thai Society. So in 2012, you co-founded this company. How did it start? And can you walk us through what the business looked like from idea stage to, say, an
Yeah.
MVP to its last iterations?
Yeah. So Thai Society was a monthly subscription rental service for ties, cufflinks, tie bars, menswear accessories. Keep them as long as you like. No late fees, no return dates. Brands like Burberry, Armani, Brooks Brothers, Hermes. I still have the pitch down because I gave it 50 times a day for 4 years straight. But basically, we saw Rent the Runway, just spinning up. There was a big Harvard case study. It's always good looking at, MIT, Harvard, a lot of these organizations that cover different aspects of innovation. The stuff that MIT puts out and Cornell puts out around blockchain is unparalleled. But in general, they were talking about the sharing economy and how the face of fashion is changing. And it was very apparent that there wasn't a male equivalent. Menswear accessories are a hell of a lot easier to ship. You can keep all your inventory in a basement and have thousands and thousands of products. And essentially, I fell into that because after being part of that first 500 startups company, Council FM, I was hanging around the offices down in Mountain View, and a new cohort was just getting started. There was 2 co-founders who had just come out from Washington, D.C., and they were looking to, they weren't looking to build their team, but I got stuck in an elevator with these guys, and that led to us going out to lunch. And then, I became one of the co-founders, and really kind of shepherding in a new direction for the company. But it all started, just basically over beer and football. A bunch of guys working in Washington, D.C. that were like, look, DC cares about what you're wearing. They care about your ties. You want to be professional at all times. And ultimately, one of the co-founders was like, look, I have all these Brooks Brother ties. You have all these J. Crew ties. Let's just bring them to the bar and just swap. We can extend, our own fashion and have people think we have more outfits than we do if we just kind of trade. And other friends got involved in it. And ultimately it's like, look, we can easily build out a digital platform that can, be utilized for for menswear rentals, which is what we did. You could always buy the products outright. But in general, I came on board and, really acting as both co-founder and CMO to go out there and try innovative marketing techniques, influencer marketing. I mean, I was literally one time going to the airport with printed out discount cards and finding, people hopping off of flights that were wearing business attire and being like, hey, try my service. But for us, PR was a huge reason why we scaled. We were covered early on by, USA Today, Washington Post, NPR. That I think for anybody working on something that's consumer facing, it can be a huge advantage to get that PR early on to get the flywheel started and users starting to come in.
Mm-hmm. And this was the first startup that you personally were a co-founder of.
Yeah.
What were some of the major learnings that you had, from start to finish?
Yeah, I'd say even in my very earliest days, I felt like fundraising was something that I learned so much about. I mean, I'm embarrassed, but also a little bit proud to look back upon some of the risks I took. Cold emailing a lot of prominent investors with very long emails and including my pitch deck and all this stuff. It took, I think, after a bunch of failures and rejections, I think one investor was like, look, dude, this isn't how you do this. Okay. Hit me with something really short and sweet, explain what value you can add to me, explain what your product does in a sentence or less, keep the email like 5 sentences, man. And, push for us to hop on a call, get coffee, whatever might make sense. Don't frame it as, hey, I want to pick your brain, or, hey, I want to see if you're interested in investing. It's putting the cart before the horse. You want to build that relationship, get their advice, maybe even approach them as an advisor or a mentor before trying to get that check. But so I think I definitely learned that, throughout the way, just learning how to properly attend and and bring my A game to an in-person investor meeting. You'd be surprised at, Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, Excel. I mean, all of these heavy hitting firms have associates, and their number one role is meeting with early stage companies and keeping them in the pipeline. And of course, as they start to have more and more success, they might become a better and better target for investment. So it's if you approach it in the right way, especially if you're meeting these people at events. I was able to get face to faces with some of the top firms here in Silicon Valley, and I did a hell of a lot of pitch events. I think that's the number one thing, regardless of what stage your company is at, even if it's pre-seed, pre-product. Being out there, being loud about what you're doing. I mean, I always tell people, pitch your Uber driver. It's great practice. They're not going to have a good understanding of what you're working on the same way your friends, your family might. So it really helps you kind of dialing in and simplifying your messaging. But I did a lot of pitch events, some of them on stage in front of hundreds of people, some of them in a weird conference room with 20 people. But either way, those were just invaluable for helping me really grow in my company and in my personal skills.
And I've heard you provide this advice before, that founders that are just arriving in the Bay should actually get out and go to events. It seems like networking is such an enormous component of being a founder, obviously being an investor for deal flow, but just professionally, it can be beneficial for all. So what advice do you have to students in the call that want to kind of improve their networking, but may not necessarily know how to do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about leading with building a relationship. It isn't going in and, just having like a 2-minute bullshit conversation and then exchanging business cards and following up and never seeing them again. You get people talking about what they like to talk about, and that might be what's on Netflix. That might be the weather, the smoke here in the Bay Area. You build that comfortability, and then you ask questions above all else. You want people to, like I said, people feel comfortable talking about themselves and what they're passionate about. So it's imperative that you do kind of frame it and show genuine interest. I think that's the best way to be an effective, salesperson or somebody in business development or whatever way you want to slice it. Even as a CEO, it's really just about, finding opportunities to add value. If you're talking to someone, they're like, I just don't have an insurance provider. Well, guess what? I have 5 insurance providers I can make intros to. Then all those insurance providers are going to thank me for making that intro, and it's going to continue to build the relationship with them as well. I always say, look, build a network of investors first and foremost. Every company wants to meet with investors. Sharpen your skills and find ways to help other startups or other founders in need. That can be everything from, getting adept at, what a good pitch deck should look like and helping them kind of vet and, and trim down and review their decks, down to, like I said, making key intros, down to even providing that support outside of what you do in the day-to-day of your career, and instead focusing more on the individual. I think it's important that we recognize, and something that I saw so much of when I first got out here was other friends and contacts moving out from the Midwest, after just graduating, who got out here and their entire life was just work, 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 work. We'd grab coffee together and I'm like, what's your social life look like? You dating? Oh, are you kidding me? Elon Musk sleeps 4 hours a night. Like I'm not dating. I'm not going out for coffee. And I was like, dude, that's the biggest mistake you can make. You need to be comfortable in your own personal life, or else it's going to tear your business down. If you're not feeling good, you're feeling, like your weekends are just filled with work. You don't have that light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have a good work-life balance. Making time for self-care, making time for building these friendships, because these friendships can often lead to business contacts, especially out here in some place like Silicon Valley. That is, people wear so many different hats and do so many side hustles. So I would say that's a really big thing, is always focus on yourself first. The people who came out and took that approach of, I'm just going to go, pedal to the floor, they ended up leaving within 3 to 4 months, and their company was shut down, and now they're doing stuff in a completely irrelated field. And I chalk that up to them just burning themselves out. It's a real problem, and it's one that's commonly overlooked.
Mm-hmm. And that relatability, when networking, part of that component is having like a level of commonality between you and the person you're speaking with. And I recall Michael Ovitz from the Creative Artists Agency in his book describing how he used to read hundreds of magazines a month so that he could converse with anyone in Hollywood. Thinking about this and how it comes across in in a way is disingenuous, what would you provide as advice to someone who maybe doesn't feel like they have an in and that they can easily incorporate themselves into the Silicon Valley tech culture, but still wants a place and still wants the opportunity to obviously succeed in it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, there's ways to kind of broaden your knowledge base and be able to add value to a discussion no matter what's on the table. If somebody's talking to me about the difference between, back end, development platforms and, Ruby on Rails versus whatever, I, I can add a little bit of value, but honestly, you don't try to represent things that you don't know. You don't try to punch above your weight class and try to impress people on something that you're completely blind about. Instead, you find ways to bring it back towards something that you do know and you are comfortable or talking about. But you don't go into conversations thinking, well, what can I say that's going to impress these people? What are they going to come out of thinking they want to connect with me? No, instead you let them shine. You turn it around. You say, wow, if someone's teaching you something new, show that appreciation. Oh my God, I didn't know any of this stuff. Like, I'd love to just kind of continue to stay in touch and find out a little bit more. Do you produce any content? Do you have a blog? I mean, I'd love to, to check that out. I mean, it's not disingenuous because you're going there and you are broadening your horizons and you're building these connections. I think it's really important to have that broad breadth of knowledge. A great way to accomplish that is just watching a hell of a lot of TV, a hell of a lot of YouTube, but really going out there and meeting people. And I know that's harder, during COVID. But of course, there still are opportunities to get together, digitally. You go to meetup.com, you can find something every single day that you can participate in to help get your skills up or help you meet new people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to touch on like one of the aspects of Thai society that I think is incredibly exciting, which is after experiencing 500 startups for the first or second batch, you were able to return as founder this time for the fifth or sixth batch, technically the fifth. What was this experience like? What was the transition you observed? How was it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm also managing director of Founder Institute and I advise for 6 or 7 accelerators on the side. Um, Accelerators have always been super near and dear to my heart and something that I think is so immensely invaluable for just teaching, companies a lot of the basics here. So for me, going through the program again, I just saw it as a new opportunity to connect with a new roster of companies and make new friends. The same companies that were part of batch 2 or were night and day from the batch part that were part of batch 5. Batch 5 had a lot of other menswear fashion companies. And I was able to learn, new skills from them. What was working on social media for them? What hashtags in some cases down that level of granularity. So for me, it was 500 always did a great job of bringing in new speakers. Yeah, they'd have the same 10 polls like, Mark Schuster giving a great talk. But they would mix things up. And I would say one of the greatest and most overlooked aspects of doing an accelerator, and one that I took a hell of a lot more advantage of when I went through the second time, is booking one-on-one time with those experts. You can find guys. I remember it was Mike Greenfield was the SEO expert. I spent a half hour with that guy. I learned more about SEO than I had in my entire life to date. So I think it's always, not being afraid to get out there. And, it's daunting at first when you're given like, hey, here's the calendars of a bunch of our experts, like, good luck, go book time. But, at first it's like, all right, I'll just join the regular talks and maybe I'll see him around the office. But being proactive in that regards and once again, showing that appreciation, I think goes a long way. You let people, you thank people, you take them out for lunch, you buy them a bottle of booze, coffee, you name it, or even you just show them some love on social media if they are trying to grow their own personal brand. I think it's important to kind of dial in that balance.
And you worked on Thai Society for about 3 years before co-founding FutureGift in 2015. This was the first platform to allow users to time delay the arrival of their purchases. And a year after founding FutureGift, you sunsetted Thai Society. Can you walk us through this process? And
Yeah.
How did FutureGift start?
Yeah. So Thai Society, we ended up selling off a bunch of the inventory to a guy in New Zealand. I formed this weird partnership where American Airlines flew me to Japan after I was covered by Tokyo TV. And when Tokyo TV covered Thai Society, we got 1 million inquiries from people in Japan wanting to start their own version of it. So I found a guy I really liked, flew out there, met with him and his team. And we built a relationship and let them operate as Thai society, which they still do to this day. They realize that it's much more direct sale that works for Japan versus the rental model. I think there's just some inherent cultural things around, using, rented products. It's cleanliness is top of mind. But, so Thai society was going through this weird shuttering process of, look, we've made this a career for 3 to 4 years. We expanded it internationally. But I think my co-founder, he was sick of doing it. And he wanted to move on to bigger and better things. He had put a bunch of money in to start it up, wanted to pull some of that out. And, I think our user base just started to stagnate a little bit. I think we didn't do a good enough job of reinvesting in new inventory. And, it was the same ties over and over. People were less excited about moving forward. So I think ultimately Thai society was a huge success, and, it was a lot of fun to work on, and, maybe didn't, generate a couple $1 million in each of our pockets or anything like that. But, certainly nice to kind of gradually move away from it. And I'd say, as things started kind of shuttering down there, one of my good friends wanted to, he wanted to work on a company together. So I pulled out my little notebook of different ideas I had in the hopper. Future Gift was the one that really both resonated with us. But very quickly learned that Future Gift was more of a feature instead of a standalone product. Also learned a lot of lessons about, who to accept money from, and, how to properly incorporate and how to run a company and manage a team. I think with the biggest lesson I learned with Future Gift is starting a company with your best friends is a huge mistake. We had fun working on it. We had fun doing pitch contests and out in Vegas, and, a lot of cool stuff together. But, Future Gifts was, I definitely, chalk up as one of my failures. But I don't see it as a failure. I don't get down on myself that, oh, this didn't end up working. We didn't end up getting acquired by Amazon, who would really want our patents around time delaying the arrival of gifts. I mean, all these grandiose ideas we had for this thing. I mean, it was an interesting to work on. But like I said, I'm very proud of the work we did, because I grew in my career. I forged new contacts. I learned new lessons. I've learned so much more from my failures than I have my own successes. It takes being put in a position where you're having to scrap, you're behind the 8 ball, things are crashing down around you. That's going to make you a more powerful or a more adept founder, regardless of what role you're in at a company. Going through those experiences, that's what separates those who've had everything go right for them. And then once things start going a little bit down the tubes, they don't know how to handle it. It's hard. And when other people's futures are on the line, and, their source of income, it really hits you hard personally. You want to make sure you're doing everything you can to help them. But, you end up realizing you're all in it together, and it might not go perfectly, but it's about what you're going to do next.
Hmm. And what were some of the major challenges that you faced, if there were any, transitioning from a business that was so centered on, supply chain and logistics to like a software business? Was that a fluid transition, or was that tumultuous? What was that like?
It was fine. I mean, I think the biggest issue was my CTO was a good friend of mine, and he still had a full-time job, and like trying to get, everything done on time was a real challenge. I mean, Future Gift, I mean, all of our work, so much of our work was just around developing the product, design, branding, because we needed to have that in place before we'd go out and really start, acquiring users. I think for us, raising the initial capital, which we were successful in doing, was a really weird experience. But, I would say between the two companies, it wasn't that much different. As opposed, I think it was just like the biggest change was just being on the very earliest side of starting a company versus, Thai society. We already kind of had, a little bit of our stuff together. But in general, I had to learn a little bit of code. I had to buckle down with my CTO and, modify a bunch of files so they would work correctly. And, we had interesting, grind sessions that I just didn't have at other roles.
Mhm. Cool. And after Future Gifts, from about 2016 to 2018, you wanted to manage business development for West Agile Labs, which is a globally a global digital design and development agency, and
Mhm.
Megabots, an entertainment company focused on developing an international league of giant fighting robots. So I'm curious as to maybe not the most interesting thing about that description, but why did you make the transition from your previous focus of marketing as a co-founder to business development, and then touching on the giant fighting robots later?
I was sick of running my own company. I was sick of being part of a startup, and I wanted to go somewhere that just had good benefits, had a clear commission plan. I think for me, I realized, while I was more of like a CMO at a Thai society, especially as CEO of Future Gift, I really started dialing in my skill set and realizing that I was really good at building deep relationships. And my wife says it, that I can make friends with a paper bag. If I'm in a, doesn't matter the personality type or whoever I'm talking to, I can kind of, be a little bit of a chameleon and find ways to find commonalities and make people feel comfortable. And BD was a natural extension of that. And even at West Agile Labs, I still spearheaded a lot of our marketing efforts, our event efforts. I built a little side sales and ales thing, which was sales professionals meeting to share connections and talk. But for me, BD, like I said, natural extension, and just it was the right fit for myself and my career development. I wanted to get off of that startup budget, wanted to, have a great wedding and a great honeymoon. And, it all just kind of, it worked well. And I never expected that I would be pulled away from West Agile, and I worked there for, over a year and a half. I was doing super well. I was just obliterating my quotas. So just being really, really effective at sales. But yeah, I was at an event and I met a couple of guys working on a giant fighting robot company, and I had heard whispers of this thing. I knew they had challenged Japan to a giant fighting robot competition. And I had to hear what they were interested, because they needed me in a BD role. I was already doing that kind of stuff. And fate led me in that direction. Company didn't make it too long after that. Unfortunately, having 14 full-time developers on staff was that really obliterated our run rate. And they weren't just they were developers is a weird way of referring to it. They were mechanical engineers, roboticists. I mean, I was part of the interview of a kid from SpaceX. We told him, sorry, you're not qualified. So it was a really interesting pathway, and building giant robots, trying to start a sports league isn't as easy as it might have looked on paper. But in general, it was that was an interesting chapter. And I really liked being part of mid-sized company that that took a lot of that pressure. I didn't feel like my day-to-day was going to impact if people could put food on the table. And I think I just needed a little bit of that for my own mental health.
Mhm. Silicon Valley is known as this place where really outrageously ambitious ideas can be funded.
Yeah.
Like, what are some startups that you've seen be funded that you think are particularly outrageous, particularly ambitious? Any ones that are like, that you kind of heard of that you got to engage with?
That's a great question. I remember I was at a future of, I mean, people would probably say it about me and Megabots building 20-foot tall fighting robots with flaming chainsaw swords. That got 6 million plus in funding and one launch festival, and had our advisors were David Stern of the NBA, Daniel, whatever his name was. The guys from who started BattleBots, Grant Imahara, RIP, from MythBusters. Like, we had our investors were the founders of Twitch. Like, we were stacked, and on paper, this company made 0 sense, but it was fun and it was weird. And a lot of angel investors, they love stuff like that. It's people that have made their money. They want to take some fun moonshots. What's more fun than a giant fighting robot league? So for me, I would say, I was at a mobility event when I was during my Megabots time, and I was on a panel with a guy who had received some initial funding for his teleportation company. I think he's still at it. He's up there in Silicon Valley, but I mean, human teleportation, just like Star Trek. I mean, what? And of course you try to talk to him about it. And he's like, oh yeah, a lot of NDAs, can't say too much. It's like, okay, bud. I would say with regards to some other really innovative stuff I've seen, I mean, I love being in cannabis, because I feel like the products I see are so off the wall. I mean, Otter Pops, flavor ices that are now infused with cannabis, seeing, just hitting the menopausal market, just like there was an article in the New York Post today about, cannabis being used, like Whoopi and Myra's company was all about, like, I think just allowing this plant and these products to hit kind of a completely different demographic than ever before. I mean, Charlotte's Web being able to, and other similar CBD treatments, being able to reduce the amount of seizures kids are having. Like, I'm blown away by that. I think seeing plant medicine and science come together and create new products and treatments, I mean, that's what gets me so excited. I mean, being able to dial in different formulations to help with certain ailments, using, cannabis and different cannabinoids is incredible to me. But, I'd say in addition to that, if I had to throw another kind of random one out there, oh, there's so many fun options. I'm struggling. I think one good one is, it's not a startup, but I did find that there was a large startup accelerator that I found out made a huge portion of their money, up to $100,000 a person per year, to facilitate trips from Asia up to Silicon Valley to expose them to this market. So, this large startup accelerator was saying, getting wealthy individuals from large Chinese corporates, solo angel investors out of, China and other parts of APAC, and bringing them out here to, like, visit some of the FANG companies, like, go visit Google, and then go visit the startup accelerator, and then go out for some nice dinners with some Silicon Valley people. Just blown away at what they were charging there. But it always kind of sparks you. It's like, okay, cool. What's the next version of that? What's the next area that people are going to want tours of, and who's the target going to be there? So that one always I felt was extremely interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And skipping through a bit of time, after experience in blockchain and advising and mentoring early stage startups, you started this position at the ArcView Group, where you started as director of business development. And since then, you've received the role of vice president of business development, overseeing business development for the organization. Can you walk us through, at a broad level, what the ArcView Group does and what your current position entails?
Yeah, the ArcView Group has been around for a decade, and it was started to kickstart legalization and destigmatization of cannabis by realizing the way that this is going to happen and this industry is going to succeed is by getting the money guys in the room. So it was designed to bring together startups, issuers looking for early stage capital, and those able to deploy it. And we saw everybody from Ease to Meadow to Tokyo Smoke raise their initial funding through us. We also started producing the industry-leading most cited research many years ago. And in addition to that, we're best known for the events that we threw. So unlike an MJ BizCon, which is, 35,000 person expo, we used to throw, we still do, but, not during COVID, usually 4 to 5 events per year in which we would bring together our investor network with companies seeking capital. So limited to just accredited investors, members of ArcView, some other service providers and stuff, and sponsors, of course, but something a little bit more focused has always been kind of our identity. And, these things used to be, we'll throw usually one international. We did one in Vancouver where we had Ricky Williams leading yoga. We've had Melissa Etheridge. We had the one we just did in New York last year. We had Damon John from Shark Tank, like sharking companies that were pitching for capital. So a lot's changed though over this last year. We were acquired by Entourage Effect Capital, and we diversified into spinning up our own fund, ArcView Ventures. We got our broker dealer, ArcView Capital, which is FINRA approved and up and running. And of course, we've had to make a large shift towards digital content. So doing, weekly webinars, some of them are pitch events, some of them are more thought leadership. We've had prominent speakers like Isaiah Thomas. We've had, we have Jim Belushi coming up on the 22nd. We've had 2 seated U.S. congressmen from either side of the aisle. So whatever we put out tends to get some quality engagement, but we're spinning it off to do some content that's a little bit less investor focused and a little bit more for the general public. So for instance, I was actually down here in Southern California filming an infused cooking workshop. So teaching you how to cook a 4-course meal with cannabis. We did that in conjunction with Pantry. So in general, I'd say my role as vice president of business development is certainly a lot of sales. That's sponsorship sales. That's our consultancy. We do a lot of work with top CPG companies, top European ag techs. So those are a little bit more of an in-depth sales process, very consultative sale, really finding out what they need. I would say a lot of my work is certainly on the content generation side. I mean, sponsors that work on our public webinars, I mean, they're doing a Jake Sponsor Corner segment with me where we're fleshing out their needs. I think even aligning, panelists in making introductions to our fund for companies seeking capital, getting my hands dirty on the consulting side and adding value where I can instead of just the sales process. And certainly, introductions to our broker dealer, introductions. I mean, it's a lot of building referral pipelines, as I mentioned earlier, because, we see 1,400 companies, our deal flow team sees 1,400 companies a year. I see more on top of that. I mean, we're really at the epicenter of this industry in many ways. And I'd say the most serious individuals, I mean, top movers and shakers, big investors, big operators, they know ArcView, they've been a part of ArcView, and they're still in our network, and we can tap to do everything from, providing a soundbite for some research we're putting out, to hopping on a panel, to getting them to sponsor, because, we're able to continue to, amplify content to, one of the largest and most engaged networks within this industry.
Hmm. And for your role in particular, how has the pandemic impacted its dynamic? You touched on that a bit, but what does that look like now?
I mean, in-person sponsorships, at our events, and, having hundreds of, people together in one room, and people getting demo booths and pitches and everything. I mean, that's obviously been replaced by people leading hands-on workshops, or people sponsoring one of our webinars, or people mass emailing our network. So we've had to just, I've had to redefine our product offering in conjunction with leadership to make sure that it's, it's a good alignment with what companies need in a digital era. So I'd say, yeah, I mean, it's changed up a lot. I've had to get a hell of a lot better at Zoom. Still doing some in-person meetings, socially distanced, over beers. But in general, I mean, it definitely threw a monkey wrench into my plan. But ultimately, given how global ArcView's always been, it's not really anything new. We have offices in New York. We have a guy in Brussels. We have, team members. We've thrown events in Asia. We've thrown events in with partners in Israel. So I think we were used to kind of working a little bit more distributed and digitally. So it wasn't that much of an adjustment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And your role at ArcView provides you with a great vantage point of the industry, as you're pointing out. What will ArcView's role be in the future of cannabis, say 5 to 10 years down the line? And I know that's really difficult to tell, but what are future growth plans?
Yeah, I'd say our consultancy is going to continue to scale like crazy, and we'll be a little bit more public about what we do. And I think we'll open it up so we have more a la carte options for earlier stage companies. Like, yeah, if I'm working with a top 5 European ag tech, like, it's going to be very hands-on. If a company reaches out saying, I need help polishing up my pitch deck, I want to have a solution for them. We do have coaching and some other sides of the equation handled, but I think getting a better process to kind of lend our expertise to a broader range of companies will be part of it. That's the consultancy side. I would say our fund is going to continue to take off. Entourage Effect Capital is supposed to seed a separate VC fund in the high single-digit millions before the end of the year. That's entirely our capital to play with versus more of the member-managed fund model we have in place right now. I think you're going to see ArcView cater less towards just accredited investors and more towards the changing face of a cannabis investor. They're retail investors, people that are investing in the Canadian Securities Exchange, Toronto Securities Exchange. I mean, there's a new opportunity to get involved and participate and share in their successes or failures. So I'd say, things like that infused cooking workshop, research report that don't just cover, the hard numbers of point of sale data or things like that. Being a little bit more broad into the environmental impact of cannabis. I mean, all of that I think is in the cards for us. And I think the pieces are largely already in place. Will we have our own accelerator? That's something I would love to see happen one day. But of course it takes a lot of time for that to come together and run successfully. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I'd say more kind of niche groups as well. Like we love our women's investor network. I think we'll spin out some similar ones for athletes and entertainers, and get some SPVs together to allow them to support companies that fit their investor criteria and align with their, kind of their underlying values.
Mhm. That's really exciting. And when you're looking at this innovation that's occurring, what's some of the most like enticing entrepreneurial opportunities that you observe in this space, like at a broad level?
Okay, so what are some of the most enticing entrepreneurial opportunities in cannabis? Oh, I would say a great example would be starting a beverage company. We've just scratched the surface with regards to what blending, cannabis and entertainment is going to look like. Going into a bar and being able to have your selection of craft beers, but also some CBD beverages, some CBD and THC beverages. I think the consumer is going to go through a very interesting journey as these start hitting our shelves and becoming a little bit more present. I mean, everyone saw that PBR just dropped their infused seltzer yesterday. So we're going to see, I think, beverages and edibles in general, they just seem to resonate a little bit more strongly with different demographics. Specifically, I'd say a little bit of an older generation. I'd say a lot of people feel like the future of this industry isn't, oh yeah, like, isn't flower, isn't, 30% THC OG Kush. And, with this terpene profile, people see the future of this industry as what's going to replace a glass of white wine for your average suburban housewife on a Tuesday night. And that might be a little Kiva bite. That might be a Thunderstorm gummy. It might be a Two Roots beverages or a Lagunitas Hi-Fi hops. But for me, I'm super amped up about what's happening on that side of the market. I would say the data side, what investors really are excited about, I've noticed, especially in the last year, has been, those with a heavy R&D element, testing facilities, formulations, people doing co-manufacturing, but also handle the formulations and, even just extraction and processing. I mean, I'd say those more technical skill sets, there's a very small group of people that possess that ability. I mean, you see people leaving, Marin Bio to start their own cannabis lab. And so I'd say if you're already coming from a deep scientific background, really looking to see how you can apply that same skill set to cannabis, I would say developing your craft and being mentored by somebody who might be an extraction artist. I mean, I've heard that term thrown around, but it really is an art. It's a science as well, but you can control how people feel and what they taste and everything just with very different, very different processes and methodologies. And of course, we're just seeing what's possible with regards to being an investor in the space. We've just seen the type of investment change so dramatically. I mean, everybody was trying to race to become, the largest vertically integrated company, and then you had to be a multi-state operator or it wasn't even worth starting a company. And then now it's back to, well, you want to be vertically integrated, but maybe a vertically integrated brand to control your full supply chain, but don't expand too rapidly into other states. So you're constantly seeing shifts and new flavor of the months, and it's becoming harder and harder to do due diligence in the space. So I would say that's pretty much covers it for me on some of those interesting entrepreneurial journeys. But for students, my advice always comes down to, being active at the local level, being an intern for one of these companies, because that's an opportunity now. ArcView's even hiring an intern for any, Michigan State alumni or current students that are interested in, the data side or the sales side. I think, just even being a local campus rep for, Students for Sensible Drug Policy or something like that. I mean, these are things that are now important to keep in mind if you want a career in this industry.
Mhm. And we've seen a lot of interest at MSU from individuals that are getting graduate degrees in chemistry that have very specialized focuses on how I can transfer, my biology degree, my doctorate in biology to the industry. We
Yeah.
see companies like Ginkgo Bioworks doing just crazy things with fermented yeast and extracting cannabinoids. Have you seen any really interesting innovations that are entangling deep tech and maybe a side of technology that wasn't typically introduced to cannabis?
You're having me talk about things that is like the most NDA protected area of the industry. No one wants to talk about their secret sauce. But yeah, I'd say, from the, higher level, bioethanol, bioplastics that are hemp derived. I mean, we're seeing, hemp is a ridiculously more efficient and more energy or more ecologically friendly fuel to produce than corn, which is being subsidized by our government and turned into ethanol. I mean, if we had those same subsidies in place to benefit hemp cultivation for fuel, oh my God, it'd be a different industry. We're seeing that on the bioplastic side as well, hemp being used for, I think, I just saw Santa Packaging. They've won ArcView pitch events before, but they create, cannabis packaging that is biodegradable. I mean, stuff that will last in a landfill for a year instead of 20 plus years, like, decades or, centuries, like some plastics. So I'd say that side of it, super, super interesting and should be heavily looked at, because I do feel like as we hit national legalization, subsidies and lobbying efforts will start pertaining to, to those two areas. And I would say, in addition to that, it's nano infusion, nano encapsulation, trying to get different cannabinoids into, into beverages and food products. It is now, of course, the last 6 months have all been about CBG and CBN, CBC. We're just starting to scratch the surface on what these different cannabinoids are going to are the effects are going to have, and what percentages of each can be dialed in, and how they interact with different terpenes and the effects that they can produce. I mean, that's the side of this that's just being pioneered. I can name the amount of CBN companies that I've seen, on a single hand versus the amount of, CBN and CBG versus, I think there's, I got this number. There's 29,000 or 2,900 CBD companies in the US. Like, there's a lot out there. So it's time to start looking at, at new molecules and new science.
Mm-hmm. For students that are wanting to acquaint themselves with the space, that are unable to go to a class and actually learn about any of this, what are resources that you'd recommend they look into to learn about cutting edge innovation, but then obviously just fundamentals as well?
Yeah. I love our content. I'd say arcviewaccess.com is where you can watch a lot of our webinars and hear from industry experts themselves. It's all free. A lot of this is simulcast on our YouTube as well. I would say my big ones are, I'd say read the Cannabis Manifesto by our co-founder, Steve D'Angelo, to really understand a lot about this fight towards legalization. I'd say no matter who you are in the cannabis space, if you're a CEO, you're a researcher, you're an intern, this, unlike any other industries, I mean, people are in this because they believe in the power of the plant. They believe in, the impact that this can have on people's lives. It's not just some other product for us. So, read about the struggle and the backs of who this was built on. I mean, you have an industry where there's 4% African-American founders. And ultimately, if you look at who's been incarcerated for marijuana, predominantly, it's minorities. If you need to be literate about the social struggle. You need to be literate about, about plant cultivation. If you want to be successful in this industry, it's about being able to put on, the suit and tie, and talk to the investors or the science guys, but it's also being able to put on the, the cookies flat bill and the hoodie and go out there with some growers and understand what the hell they're talking about. So read some books by Ed Rosenthal, for instance. I mean, masters of their craft. Read books in general, about startups, because many of these companies are going to be very early stage. Read Lean Startup by Eric Ries, Lead 0 to 1 by, Peter Thiel and Blake Masters, and just broaden your skill set and be aware of the fact that the companies that you're going to be reaching out to, yeah, some of them might have $4 billion market caps, but they came together in the last couple of years. They're still figuring things out. You need to learn how to be agile. And if you can prove some of that, at the campus level by running your own operation or doing a fundraiser or starting a club or doing anything for impact, I mean, that can go a really long way. But I would say don't sleep on new cannabis ventures. I'd say most of my industry knowledge is in like daily updates are coming from like, MJ Biz, getting on their newsletter, getting on New Cannabis Ventures, getting on Cowen if possible, Canaccord Genuity, Viridian. All of those have amazing like daily or weekly emails that are just full of such great information. And of course, if you go on the LinkedIn's or anywhere else, I mean, this is all being shared. I mean, look at what Supernova women are doing, and and on I think on the social impact side, there's so much going on in the space, and everyone is being so loud about it. So if you're on social media and you're on, doesn't make a difference if it's LinkedIn or if it's Instagram, there's still great content and live videos and just the opportunity to allow you to actually ask questions, versus just joining a webinar, something where you can actually, get your own questions about the industry answered.
Hmm. And what advice would you have more generally to students that are maybe interested in entering the tech space or just curious about the cannabis industry but want to go into another industry when it comes to their marketability and entering the job sector?
Yeah, I'd say go to a lot of career development work. Work with your local career development center. Do a lot of what are they called? Career fairs. I think can really help with that. And you start to learn from the hiring managers themselves what skills they're prioritizing. I would say talk to hiring managers and say, look, I'm a student who wants a career in this, and I would love to just learn a little bit about what skills that you prioritize for this role, so I can work on developing those skills while I'm at university. And then of course make it reciprocal. Say, look, and what can I do to add value? I'm here on campus. I can, if you guys are doing anything with students, you looking for brand ambassadors, like I can help align some of that. We can do an interview with our local student newspaper. You find ways to create reciprocal value and really learn from experts. Even participating in things like today's session, I think you can help get some of those nuggets. But it comes down to, I'd say, doing the research, like I said, all of those books I mentioned previously, watching some Shark Tank, I think that can help in some capacity. But it's not being afraid to ask questions first and foremost, and starting to build a network and being transparent about what your ask is. Don't go to people saying, oh my God, can I book your time? I have a startup to work on. Be transparent that what you're trying to accomplish in securing a couple minutes.
Mhm. And maybe looking back at your time at Indiana University, how much of your present success do you accredit to it? Because it's a lot of advice on, work outside of the classroom. So I'm curious as to your thoughts there.
I mean, in general, I look at colleges and universities as a great way to learn how to learn good study habits and buckle down and work towards a deadline. But it's primarily about becoming yourself. And, I think in high school, you're kind of a little bit of, your identity is molded by who your friends are and who your parents are. And I think in college, you cut the cord and you're able to kind of come into your own and build your own identity and find out what resonates with you and meet different types of individuals, from, like I said earlier, a huge range of different backgrounds. So I'd say that's what IU primarily afforded me, is that, I felt like, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm going to say it. I felt like I spent the first couple of years at IU and still in high school. Like it was the same, I joined a frat right off the bat. My girlfriend was in a sorority. Our identity was the frat and the sorority. Our friends were the frat and the sorority. And it wasn't until we broke up and I started being like, okay, like a little bit of an identity crisis. Who the hell am I? I want to stop doing all these frat things and instead want to live with people that I like and hang out with people that that are aligning with me more on a different level of values or whatever. I think that was the big thing is taking risks and stepping outside your comfort zone and reinventing yourself not feeling like, I have to have this built-in network of friends or I have to have the support network, whatever it is. I think is a very big step. And yeah, I think IU did a great job of occasionally bringing in entrepreneurs, but they were talking from B-Town menus and campus foods and, their little food delivery things, which were great. And they probably sold to, Postmates and made a bunch of money. But at the time, it's not like we ever heard from a cannabis entrepreneur. So I would say, it was all important for helping me shape who I am as an individual and great study habits, and even building some connections that persisted, even after graduation, of course. But for me, I'm part of the reason I'm doing this is I'm hoping for a world in which, there are thought leaders and there are people that are in this industry actually making students aware that you can be successful, you can build a career in something like cannabis or blockchain or giant fighting robots, because the world, it's I guess it's a little bit of like a, Burning Man type of thing and stuff, but, put out into the universe what you want to see, visualize what you want to see. And I'm not saying read Oprah's The Secret and live that as your life, but, it really is about, blazing your own trail and taking these risks. And, I think that's the one thing I look back upon my entire career and I'm really proud of, is the fact that I didn't compromise in that regards. And I went out there and I, did some stuff that might have been a little bit against the grain or a little bit of a moonshot. But ultimately was a great learning experience. And I'm hoping to make the world a little bit friendlier to, to future generations, to be able to do these sort of things that are so cool and game changing.
That's awesome, Jake. I think that's a great way to wrap up today's talk. And I really appreciate you being able to give us your time and providing us with your insights. This has been really awesome. And I'd love to refer students to some of your content online, whether it's following you on LinkedIn. If you have any publications or any social media accounts that you'd like to shout out, that'd be super cool.
Follow me on LinkedIn. My last name, I mean, you can just Google me. There's like 4 people with my last name in America. I mean, 4.5 because my wife hyphenates. But like, I'm very easy to find. So add me on LinkedIn. On every platform, I'm just like /Kuczyruk, like Instagram /Kuczyruk, Facebook /Kuczyruk. I just snapped it up before anybody in Eastern Europe could get it, in my own family. In general, go to arcviewaccess.com, see some of our cannabis related digital content. Check out accelerators like 500 Startups. Check out Founder Institute, especially if you're pre-seed, early stage. But in general, I'm super communicative. I know my time is often very limited because I do so much. But I'm always able, especially if you give me a quick question and you're just looking for a quick answer, send me a LinkedIn chat, send me a Facebook request, whatever it is, I'll get you an answer. It's just, you're going to have way more success versus, hey, Jake, this is my background. These are all these things. And I really want to talk to you about, something vague. Like, I'm not going to respond to vagueness. No investor responds to vagueness. Keep it tight and recognize that, our time's valuable. 5-10 minutes, we might be able to help you with what you need.
Awesome, Jake. Well, thank you so much.
Mateo, thanks again for having me on. And this breaks my heart to say, but go Spartans. I'll be regretting that when our basketball teams face off again.
Yeah, we've got the clipped.
No, it's funny. This is a little bit of an insider tip and a weird Jake fact that I've never revealed publicly before. First time I ever consumed cannabis was on Michigan State's campus.
Go green.
Now I'm just to argue. So. Crazy awesome. How the world shakes out.
Well, have a good one. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This was a great conference. It's really awesome to have Jake. I think you're our last speaker, so just really an amazing way to close things off.
All right. Well, I'm happy to be the keynote. And if there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I look forward to seeing you back at maybe a future one.
Awesome. Well, take care. Bye, everyone.